said that,
sir, Lokesh ji.
Yes, sir.
Just a minute for initial opening remarks, and then you can comment.
Sure. Please,
okay.
Please, no problem.
Yeah. Secretary of the branch, CA Prashant Kumar. Learned speaker for today's virtual CP program, CA Lokesh Vasudevan Garu. Senior members of the profession, respected past chairman, my colleagues in the managing committee, my dear professional colleagues, team members of FRRB ICAI, a very good evening to you all and welcome you all to this second day of CP seminar on commonly found non-compliances of accounting standards and standards on auditing, organized by Financial Reporting Review Board FRRB ICAI, hosted by Visakhapatnam branch of SARSF ICAI. We, the members of Visakhapatnam branch, once again convey our sincere thanks to FRRB ICAI for giving us this opportunity to host the 2 days virtual CP seminar. We, the members of Visakhapatnam branch, convey our heartful thanks to the speaker, CA Lokesh Vasudevan Garu, for accepting our request to address the members of Visakhapatnam branch on today's topic, overview of SA 220, quality control for audited financial statements, and SQC1, quality control of historical financial information and other assurance and related service engagement. To ensure that information provided in the financial statements are of high quality and are acceptable worldwide, the Accounting and Assurance Standards Board under the Council of Institute of Chartered Accountants of India have formulated few standards. These are in line with the international standards issued by the International Auditing and Assurance Board IAASB. Standards issued by the IASB include standards of quality control SQCs for all the services under engagement standards. These standards are applicable to all auditing firms which perform audits and reviews of historical financial information, including assurances and related service engagements. Standards on auditing SS for auditing historical financial information. These apply whenever any independent audit is carried out. In simpler words, whenever an independent examination of financial information is carried on for any entity, whether the business motive is to make profit or not, whether the size of the entity is big or small, or even if the entity has any legal form, unless any law specifies something else, the SAS will be applicable. All SAS are interlinked and have to apply in unity. The number given to SA is similar to the numbering system followed for international standards on auditing formulated by IAASB. Coming to SA 220, quality control for an audit of financial statements. These standards deals with the specific responsibilities of the auditor regarding the quality control procedures for an audit of financial statements. It also addresses, where applicable, the responsibility of the engagement quality control reviewer. This standard prescribes that quality control policies and procedures should be implemented at both levels of audit firm and on individual audits. The purpose of SQC1, the standard on quality control, is to offer guidance with respect to the responsibility of a firm for the system of quality control for its audit and reviews and various other assurance and related services engagements. SQC1. The key idea is that a firm form a separate quality control intended for providing reasonable assurance that a firm and its employees adhere to the professional standards and legal and regulatory requirements, and also that reports which are issued by such firm or its engagement partners are apt in the circumstances. It also deals with the aspects relating to the responsibilities of the leadership for quality on audits within a firm, which include informal discussions, internal memos, newsletters, education and training, monitoring, process to deal with any non-compliance. Another aspect of it, ethical requirements together with objectivity, integrity, confidentiality, professional competence, due diligence, professional behavior. Another one includes acceptance and continuance of client relationships and specific engagements, which includes many. Another one, human resources. The SQA requires a firm to have personnel with competence, capabilities, commitment to ethical principle for enhancing the firm to deliver the engagements. The policies employed by the firm should address the issues like recruitment, capabilities and competence, performance evaluation, career development, compensation promotion, estimate of personal requirement. Another one, engagement performance. Last but one aspect is monitoring. And finally, documentation. Our learned speaker, CA Lokesh Vasudevan from Delhi, will explain much in detail about these issues involved in these standards, SQC with detail. Let us have a knowledge gaining in this session. Now I request CA Andavarupu Sridhar to introduce the speaker of today's session, CA Lokesh Vasudevan Garu.
Good evening, members. Today, I'm pleased to introduce CA Lokesh Vasudevan ji. He has qualified in the year 2008, and he served as a sole proprietor in his town called Kolur. Later, he joined in the industry and served in finance in various capacities. Subsequently, from the year 2013 onwards, he is working as a partner with Messrs. Brahma and Company, Chartered Accountants. Later, he has participated in various ICA initiatives of like India Accounting Standards Board, Auditing and Assurance Standards Board, etc. He is a founder of Knowledge Meet series of technical seminar sessions organized by Brahma and Co for its employees. He has presented HBS case laws among chartered accountants in general management and communication skills courses organized by the ICAI. He was awarded as the best participant in the general management and communication skill course organized by the ICAI. He has handled assignments in overseas such as Singapore, Mauritius, UAE, and Australia. With these few words, I introduce CA Lokesh Vasudevan ji to the August Gallery.
Thank you, Sridhar Garu. Now I request the speaker to take up the session, sir. Lokesh ji.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your kind words, Chairman sir and Secretary sir. Thank you so much. It was a wonderful introduction. And as I was mentioning earlier, the timing of taking up this particular two standards is very, very appropriate, considering multiple stakeholders and certain regulators taking certain stands with regard to the audit quality. So it has come to a notice that the audit quality is under significant scanner, and it is high time that we appreciate and understand the depth of these very, very important two standards, that is SQC 1 on quality control and 220 revised on audit quality in depth. Significant amount of time has been given and allotted. However, considering this to be a weekend evening, I will try to make it as understandable as possible, and I would certainly give spaces for questioning so that we'll make it a little more interactive. And I might take you through certain realistic situations which will also help us understand what are all the documentation requirements that are required to keep and satisfy the regulators. As opening comments, I'm pretty sure that all the participants here are well aware of the standard and are convinced that the audit quality in terms of leadership and ethics are always in the highest of standards. That is what we all urge, and we all ensure that it is delivered during the audit period. However, at a subsequent period, when we are supposed to convince certain authorities, be it within the ICAI or other regulatory authorities who have minor oversight over us, it is important to convince them about the documentation capacities that were sufficiently enough for the purpose of our audit. Having said that, I will split my discussion into 4 categories. Category 1 will be a minor introduction about auditing standards and why auditors' roles are very, very important for stakeholders. Number 2, we will jump into SQC 1, which is the mother standard, which is more of a preamble before we start off any audit. The third item will be the 220 on quality control. And finally, I will show you a set of documents which are required as a discussion that we had on SQC 1 and 220. These formats are prescribed and taken from relevant authoritative pronouncements issued by the ICA, which will be helpful for the members because whatever pronouncements are given are illustrative formats, they can always be amended to suit the convenience of the practitioners and also the economic condition and the kind of client that is being under operation. So allow me to share my screen, and for the benefit of bandwidth, I will just stop my video. However, I'll just share my screen to start off with the initial presentation. I hope this kindly give me a second, please.
Yeah, okay, sir.
I hope the screen is visible for the participants.
Sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. So just giving an overview of introduction to the standard so that the flow is much easier for understanding. Why are standards, what are standards and why is it so important? It's because they are codified principles and their guidance to auditors and service providers, which are more hand-holding effort to provide and do a proper services and bring uniformity and consistency in professional practice. And it's a measure to enhance the quality of audit work. And is following auditing standard compulsory? Yes, it is. It's a requirement of the Companies Act, which stipulates 143(9), requires that the auditing standards is followed by all the practitioners. Non-compliance of auditing standards will be deemed as guilty of professional misconduct under Schedule 2. And standards bring in a sort of discipline in doing the audit or any other engagement work. And most important thing is the standards provides almost all answers for almost all circumstances that we face during the course of audit. So they are guiding principles which bring in a discipline to the practitioner. To give you an update on the Schedule 2 of CA Act, whether it talks about the professional misconduct, whether a CA is deemed to be guilty. The first aspect is if it fails to disclose a material fact. Next aspect is to fail to report a material misstatement. Third is practitioner does not exercise due diligence or is grossly negligent. The fourth aspect is the practitioner fails to obtain sufficient information which is necessary to express an opinion. And the last is fails to invite attention to any material departure. So all these crucial elements are built into respective standards which help us as a guiding principle to conclude an audit or any other engagement. The history and background, a brief history was provided by a chairman, sir. Nevertheless, just as a repetitive measure, the research committee constituted by the ICAI for developing accounting and auditing practice was done as early as 1955. And subsequently, the SAPs, I'm sure most of the senior practitioners here will understand this term. We call it as SAs, however, earlier it was SAPs, was brought in by the research committee in 1964. And after which the IFAC brought in the International Auditing Guidelines in 1977. The audit practicing committee constituted by the ICAI is spearheaded for the new framework and guidance note in 1982. The APC was subsequently renamed as the Audit and Assurance Standard Board, and the Statement of Auditing Practices was renamed as Auditing and Assurance Standards. And in 2008, a very crucial year, where the new nomenclature of AAS amendment had come in, bringing criteria of different types of auditing and assurance standards, which is SQC, SAS, SREs, SAEs, and SRS. So the understanding the difference, the SQC is a standard on quality control. Currently, one standard has been issued. The standards on auditing, which we call as SAs, standards on review engagement, which are SREs, standards on other assurance engagements, which is SAE, and standards on relative services, which are SRS. The types of assurance engagements which are within the standards are audit, which we are all pretty familiar, where we give a reasonable assurance, which is a positive assurance, which we call during a reporting framework. Review engagements, where the level of assurance is limited. That's why it's called a limited review engagement, where moderate assurance given. And the reporting framework is a negative assurance framework, where we give a review conclusion and not an audit opinion. And the related services, which comprise upon agreed upon procedures, which are like certification services, where we don't provide any assurance, and compilation engagements, where we compile financial data, where there is no assurance that is provided. In the agreed upon procedures, for example, we give a certification, we call it as factual finding, where we say it's true and correct. And when we give a compilation engagement, we say we have compiled this information for the purpose of ABCD. So this is the broad overview of standards, where we talk about audit, review, or the related services. Before we begin, it's very important that we all understand, as partners of nation building, we are on national duty, because any assurance engagement, there is a tripartite relationship, which is a practitioner, a responsible party, which is the management, and the intended user. So this three-party relationship is very, very important for the nation. The other essential element is the appropriate subject matter, which could be an audit engagement or other assurance engagement or a limited review engagement. The suitable criteria should be defined, whether it is a general purpose financial statement or a special purpose financial statement or a certification services. The crucial one is obtaining sufficient and appropriate evidence. And the final aspect is to give a written assurance report. So this is the first segment of our discussion. I will just take you on to the other presentation, which we can start off with SQC1. I hope the screen is visible to all of you.
Yes, sir. Visible, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. The standards on quality control 1, which provides the base standard for quality control while performing audits and review of historical financial information, including all other types of assurance engagement or related services. So this is the mother standard for quality control, and it was effective for all engagements beginning 1st April 2009. Let's go on with the overview of the quality control standards. With the definitions, some of the crucial definitions we'll be evaluating, and those definitions have a significant impact on who or what and which is responsible. The elements of system of quality control, 6 elements are there, and these 6 elements almost cater to the entire portion of the standard, which comprise of leadership, ethics, acceptance and continuance of engagements, human resource, how to perform the engagement, and finally monitoring. So we see the entire life cycle of engagement, starting from the leadership up to conclusion, monitoring, and documentation. And within those subheads, we will also be dealing a little bit in detail on the important criteria within these specific ethical requirements. The objective of this particular standard on quality control is to establish a responsibility for the system of quality control for audits and other assurance engagement. So what kind of responsibility a firm should own during performance of any engagement or during performance on any other related services. the parameters to adjudicate or judge when or who will be judged as responsible, and from where the relevant framework comes. These are the regulatory and authoritative framework. One is basically the Chartered Accountants Act and the Code of Ethics, which drives professional responsibility. And time and again, relevant pronouncements keep coming in from the ICA, either through auditing and assurance framework or any other authoritative pronouncements like the implementation guidance notes. These are all relevant pronouncements from the ICA and other frameworks which also assess, for example, ICFR requirements or CARO requirements. So these are all coming from other pronouncements. Collectively, these are all called the code. The system of quality control. The preamble stipulates that all firms should have a system of quality controls that provide reasonable assurance that the firm as well as the personnel of the firm comply with the professional, regulatory, and legal requirements, and the reports issued by the firm are appropriate in the circumstance. It's a twofold requirement, one of which is closely related to each other, that is, the firm and the personnel of the firm, which includes the audit managers, qualified staff, or anybody connected with the engagement. They have to comply with the professional standards, which are either the auditing assurance standards or the Code of Ethics or the CA Act or relevant requirements. And after complying with the standards, it should issue that the reports issued by the firm are appropriate to the circumstances, be it a qualified report or a clean report, which is an unmodified opinion. It should all comply from the professional standards perspective. Some important definitions that are part of the standard. I'm sure these are self-explanatory. However, for the benefit of all the participants, let us deal with each and every standard because some terms are very, very crucial. Some may be new for certain people, but nevertheless, let's go through each standard, each definition provided in the standard. What is engagement documentation? Engagement documentation is a record of work performed, result obtained, and conclusions. So ideally, it should be a record, which means there should be a written record. Whenever we say a record, it should be documented in written format. So it should document what is the work performed, what are the results that have been obtained out of the work performed, and finally, what conclusion have you reached on account of the results. So this will be assembled for each engagement in the engagement file. So there's a definition of an engagement documentation. The engagement partner, I think it's self-explanatory. There is the partner who is a member of the ICA who's responsible for the engagement. So we can call this as a signing partner or partner in charge, signing partner. Engagement quality control review. So engagement quality control review is a process to provide objective evaluation before issue of the report for significant judgments and conclusions in formulating the report. So every audit engagement should have an engagement quality control review. We call it as EQC review. And the EQC review is a process which evaluates significant judgments and conclusions of the engagement team before issue of the report. So this is very, very crucial to understand that the evaluation should be done prior to the issue of the report. The next definition is on account of engagement quality control reviewer. Now, who is qualified as an engagement quality control reviewer? He can either be a partner of the firm or other person in the firm who's suitably qualified. One can also be an external person or a team member with sufficient and appropriate experience and authority who can objectively evaluate the judgments. He should have a proper objectivity to understand and evaluate judgment made by the engagement team, including the engagement partner, before the issue of the report. Now, it is unlikely in our given circumstance for an engagement quality control reviewer to be any other person other than a partner. So most cases, I would say 99.9 cases, the engagement quality control reviewer will definitely be another partner of the firm who is suitably qualified, who has significant authority and experience, and can objectively evaluate. Within the participants here, I'm pretty sure that some of you would have filed the NFRA 2 forms, where if you are falling within the criteria, you would have witnessed that the government and the regulator will also requires you to document and mention the name of the engagement quality control reviewer also. So this engagement quality control reviewer is very, very important for the audit function. Engagement team, I think it's self-explanatory, all persons performing the engagement, including experts. So if you have hired any external expert to take any legal opinion involving Companies Act, or to assess actuarial issues, or to assess any contingent liabilities, we have evaluated experts' work. So they all formulate a part of the engagement team. The firm is self-explanatory. It could be a sole practitioner, a partnership, or any other entity permitted by law. For the time being, it could be sole practitioner, partnership, or LLP, given the Indian circumstances. Inspection, again, a self-explanatory definition. For completed for engagements, it's a procedure applied on audit engagement team to evaluate the evidences. Listed entities, it's also self-explanatory. It could be shares, stocks, or debt instruments which are quoted in the recognized stock exchange. Definition of monitoring. Monitoring is a process about consideration evaluating the firm's quality control systems, and it should be a periodic process. And why monitoring is important is to get reasonable assurance that QC systems are working properly. Network firm, I'm sure all of us are well aware about what network firm's definition are. It has been well debated earlier also. Partner is also a self-explanatory definition, whose authority behind the firm for performing the professional services and engagement. Personnel, which is the audit engagement team staff, the partners and the staff. Professional standards are obviously the engagement standards and the relevant ethical requirements. Reasonable assurance, this has also been well elaborated in multiple standards, which says high but not absolute level of assurance. It's not 100% assurance, but reasonably high assurance. Staff is a part of the engagement team, which includes the experts also. Suitable qualified external person, this is taken from the definition when we talk about a quality control reviewer, which stipulated any individual outside the firm who has capabilities and competence to act as an engagement partner. In reality, not many circumstances emerge where we have a suitably externally qualified person to evaluate. So these are the basic definitions which have been mentioned as part of the SQC1. Now we are moving on to the most important segment. What are the elements of the quality control, standards on quality control? These are the 6 elements which gain utmost importance while performing any engagement. I am stressing on the word engagement because our discussion should not be restricted only to performance of audit. We could also do other services, like I said, the certification services which fall under SRS, Standards on Related Services, 4400 to be precise, or compilation engagements where we do compilation of work which do not fall under any audit services where we do not give any assurance. So elements of standards on quality control, 6 elements are there. The first and foremost is the leadership responsibility for quality control. Next is the ethical requirements. Third is client acceptance and continuance. 4 is human resources. 5th is engagement performance. And finally, what is more important is monitoring. The 7th element, documentation, which is in all standards. If you read standards, almost the last para of each standard will be documentation. So even when you're complying with SQC, there are certain documentation measures, which is also mentioned separately as a paragraph. However, the key elements are 6 in nature. I'll just repeat: leadership, ethical requirements, client acceptance and continuance, human resources, engagement performance, and monitoring. Before we deep dive into each of these elements, I'll just give you an overview of all these elements. leadership responsibility with quality control, which means the identified engagement partner in charge, takes care of leadership responsibilities to ensure that the quality control is being established within the firm as a policy. First of all, a firm should have quality control processes which are well understood and digested by the leaders, which are who are crucially the partners in charge. Moving on, ethical requirement, as we are all aware, we are bound by the Code of Ethics and the relevant regulations, where all ethical requirements in terms of integrity, objectivity, independence, all these have to be maintained throughout the engagement, not just to the start or the end. It should be maintained throughout the performance of the engagement. The third element is client acceptance and continuance. So whenever you're accepting a client or continuing the engagement year after year with a client, we should ensure that all the other elements are also satisfied with regard to leadership. Do I have ethical requirement to continue? Is there any conflict of interest? When accepting, is there any conflict? In the subsequent year, when I'm doing, is there any human resource lacking? Will I be able to actually perform the engagement in case of newer engagement? So all these have to be evaluated while we are accepting a client or continuing a client in the subsequent periods. Item number 4 is human resource, which I'm sure all of the participants here will agree is the most vital, where adequately trained staff with expertise and who understand all the other elements of quality control are very, very important. And each of the human resource elements should be provided suitable work and also knowledge on a time and again basis to perform the engagement. The fifth item is engagement performance, where actual performance of the engagement will happen. And during such phase, what are the aspects that have to be taken care is elaborated in the standard. And sixth element, which is also very crucial, is monitoring. Whether all these elements are being appropriately evaluated and monitored is also very crucial. Now let us jump into each of these significant items. Before we start, one more word I would like to elaborate is the standard that we'll be discussing again, SA 220. Most of these elements covered in SQC1 will be mostly a repetition there. So the more we spend time here, it will be easier for us to understand 220. So let's move on with the leadership responsibilities. So this we'll come back to it later, where we talked about the documentation of QC policies. Number 1, leadership responsibilities. The prima facie focus of a firm is to design policies and procedures. My humble request for all participants here who have a notepad with them, the first and foremost point you should write down is, I should develop a policy and procedure for QC. So I'll give you a corollary example. Whenever we walk into a plant to do an audit, which says I have a ISO certificate or a TQI certificate. So those are obtained by virtue of proving that there is certain quality control manual in place. Similar to that, an audit firm should have a QC manual. On general terms, we call it as a quality control manual, QC manual. That QC manual will elaborate all policies and procedures related to quality control of the firm. So any participant here who does not have this QC manual, the first thing that you should write down in your notepad today is develop a QC manual, which details the policies and procedures regard to quality control. That is the first document. This particular leadership should take the first initiative of developing the QC manual. And based on the QC manual, they need to promote internal culture within the entire engagement team and the office to ensure that quality is the most important aspect of any engagement. And all of them will comply with the professional standards and issue report only if quality control processes are effective. This will also require the CEO or managing partner, in our case, to assume ultimate responsibility for a quality control. You can either designate a specified quality control partner, or the managing partner of the firm will be ultimately responsible for QC. So this should also come with a policy mandate which states that any high quality work will have a recognition and a reward. So this is specified in the standard itself. So you can digest the fact that if we do not have any QC manual, the first thing that the firm should do, when I mean firm, it could also mean sole proprietor. We saw the definition, right? Where firm also included any type of entities. So any firm here who does not have the policies and procedures for quality control, please develop a quality QC manual immediately. So continuing with the leadership responsibilities, the leadership should assume responsibility to communicate these quality control manuals very frequently. So this QC manual should be like a Bible for the auditor or Bhagavad Gita for the auditor, where the training, seminars, meetings, informal dialogues, newsletters should frequently communicate that, oh, independence, for example, independence is one of the key criteria. You should always be independent. Should not buy stocks, should not buy shares, no trading is allowed, insider trading cannot be allowed, continuous training should be in quality control. So these kind of communications also the leadership should assume responsibility. And this should be incorporated in the firm's internal training material. And also during every appraisal document, we should frequently check whether this quality control manual has been digested by all the staff members. Moving on, the leaders should also recognize that the quality presides business objective. So number one, most important criteria is quality. It should not overtake the requirement of any business objective. So accordingly, you should assign management's responsibility properly. The HR policies in the firm should demonstrate the QC commitment. This also, I'll give you a specific example. Those who have audited, say, pharma companies, you might know that in order to get a FDA license or an MHA license, the quality control document will also have HR policy documentation, where it stipulates that how the hiring happens. Do you maintain record of all the people who you hire? Whether confidentiality is maintained. All this is mentioned in the FDA manual or MHA manual. Similarly, here the quality control manual should also recognize the HR policies, where the human resource people who are recruiting should keep in mind that the quality control of the firm is a committed quality control and suitable demonstration is also being done. Then the person delegated for QC responsibility, be it, like I said, a quality control partner or a management partner, should have sufficient experience and ability to and authority to assume responsibility. Ideally, in our case, we call that as a managing partner or a designated quality control partner. So we have dealt with the first aspects of leadership. I think we are self-explanatory. Just for the interest of members, because it's a larger standard, I will pause for a few seconds. Kindly unmute yourself, and any doubts regarding the first element of leadership, I will take in questions. I'll give the answers to the best of my ability. We'll pause for a minute. If there are any questions which are unable to speak because of any connectivity, kindly feel free to drop your questions in the chat. We've already received one question. Sir, where to find template for QC manual? Yeah, so this is not publicly available. I'm sure that within the professional community, we'll be able to find certain QC manuals. I will also share towards the end of the presentation a QC manual which we are adopting. However, the implementation guide on SQC1 has 6 annexures which deal with some important questions that we will be talking regarding SQC1. That also I'll show to you towards the end of the presentation. But there are templates and checklists for quality control that should serve the purpose for the QC manual.
So members, you can unmute yourself and you can ask question directly to the speaker, or else you can put it in the chat box also. Any queries, members?
Yeah, we'll move on. So I'm sure there will be doubts when we speak forward. Yeah.
Yeah, at the end of the session, the doubts may arise, sir.
Sure,
so
sure.
At that time we can handle it. Okay, okay.
We are moving to the next important element, which I think is within our blood and nerves and every part of the body, which is the ethical requirement. I don't think we need to spend much time on this, but I'll I'll just take a brief overview because the ethical requirements, policies and procedures will only enable us get a reasonable assurance, and the firm's personnel should necessarily comply with all the relevant ethical requirements and the fundamental ethics and principles which is already there in the first standard: integrity, objectivity, professional competence, due care, confidentiality, and professional behavior. So these are the core principles under which an audit is also done. This is there in the very first standard, which talks about basic principles governing an audit. These are also repeated in SQC1 within the second element called ethical requirements. The fundamental principles are enforced by leadership of the firm. So the leadership of the firm should continuously drive all these characteristics of integrity, objectivity, professional care, confidentiality, and so on. And these should be continuously enforced by education and training. So there should be continuous training, seminars, or material that keep going on to the engagement staff, including the linked to partners, to ensure that ethical requirements are there during the start of the audit, through the audit, or to the end of the audit. I mean, the engagements, start of the engagement, through the engagement, and the end of the engagement. I can give a practical example of where independence could be lacking. Say, for example, an audit is being taken up and we hire resources, or we put in resources, human resources, during the start of the engagement. We ask all the engagement staff that this is a listed company, since you will have case sensitive information, please, you're not supposed to trade in shares of this entity as prescribed in the relevant regulations. So do you have shares? Now, all the engagement team may say, no, we don't have shares. Some people may have shares, which we should tell them to take suitable action. Now, there could be a situation that during the course of the engagement, either the engagement team member or a close relative may acquire shares, which could be termed as an insider trading. So time and again, this particular training should be given to the engagement staff to ensure that this particular confidentiality or requirement of not holding shares of the entity should be a continuous one. So this should be reinforced continuously. Then monitoring of this particular ethical requirement should also happen from the leadership, and process of dealing with non-compliance. Okay, yes, there is a non-compliance. There was a quality control issue during sampling procedures. There's a quality control issue when a particular team could not do it because of lack of expertise. Now, what do I deal with this? So this also should be driven by the fundamental principles. And the ethical requirements enshrine independence. So this, when you are meeting the entire ambit of all ethical requirements, you are considered to be an independent auditor. And that's why we sign at the title of the standard itself, there's an independent audit report issued to the members of XYZ Limited. So the fundamental core principles is independence, and independence is achieved by following all the ethical requirements mentioned in SQC1. So to elaborate a little bit more on the independence, the SQC manual should establish policies and procedures to ensure that reasonable assurance and maintenance of independence by relevant person is available throughout the engagement. In case of any breach, which could happen due to controllable factors or uncontrollable factors, the firm should be notified of those breaches also. And this QC manual should enable communication of independence requirement, which is we should send out checklists or notices that you're not supposed to violate independence. We should identify situations where could be a threat to independence. So our engagement team member could actually be related to a director of one of the companies. There could be a threat. So that kind of evaluation should happen throughout the engagement. In case of any appropriate action has to be taken, we have to ensure that these threats are removed, or if such threat is apparent, what could be the fallout, which is the withdrawal of engagement. And any breaches of independence, what is the methodology for resolution? Yeah, so this is the the chart that describes the maintenance of independence of a personnel, and in case of any breach of independence, the engagement partners to provide firm with relevant information about the client. So the particular firm, also the engagement team, and those who are unrelated to the engagement also, we should be aware of taking up of a specific engagement. any threats, there should be a prompt notification and accumulation and communication of relevant standards to the appropriate personnel should be continuous. In case of breach of independence, all subjected to independence should notify the breach, and there should be prompt communication of breach. Like I said, it could be controllable or non-controllable factors also. So the general principle that I've taken is an independence checklist is there in SQC1, which I'll be share implementation guide, which I'll also share it to you towards the end of the presentation, where an annual written confirmation is being made. And also to ensure that a familiarity threat, right? By using same senior person throughout the engagement, there could be a familiarity threat. And also the rotation requirement of partner, which is also stipulated as a test criteria within the standard. We'll have to check whether this is also an important methodology to reduce the familiarity threat on rotation of partner or engagement team. Yeah, so this is in regard to the second important aspect regarding ethics. I'll pause for a minute to take questions from participants. I have one question which has come up from Sri Sudhakaran. Is the requirement for engagement CA and review has come into existence in India? If so, from when? Yeah, this particular requirement of SQC was notified and established as early as 2009. So SQC1 for the time being is mandatory for listed entities where the quality control reviewer is required. But what we understand from NFRA compliances now is based on the NFRA requirement, it is mandatory for all firms which fall within NFRA 2 to also stipulate who is a responsible QC partner, quality control partner. And therefore, in my professional opinion, it is important that all engagements, a quality control reviewer is mandatory, and it has been mandatory since 2009 when SQC1 was made effective. I'm fairly certain that yeah, if there are no questions related to ethics, I'll move on to the third element of quality control, which is client acceptance and continuance.
Members, any more questions? So there's one more question in the chat box.
Yeah, I'll take this. Yeah, the reviewing person partner has to give any separate report? No, this is only an internal matter where during the definitions we had mentioned the role of the quality control reviewer. Before the engagement partner issuing the report, the professional judgments and the stand taken on important matters have to be assessed by the reviewing partner, who is completely unrelated to the engagement. He should review the documentation and convince himself that the engagement partner's view is appropriate in the circumstances. So internal documentation can be there, which means engagement team's view, partner's view, and reviewing partners, QC partner's view can be documented through a minutes or an internal documentation. But there's no requirement to give a separate report, as it's not mandated in any standard. There's no format. It just stipulates that a reviewing partner, and so if tomorrow the the QRB or the NFRA or ICA peer review asks us, right, how can you prove me that the quality control reviewer has actually done his duty of reviewing? Then we need to prove some documentation. So the QC reviewers points are to be documented, and the discussion between the engagement partner and the quality control partner along with the engagement team should be documented. It could be in any format. Yeah, the next question is the time limit for reviewer's report. Like I said, there's no documented format for the report. However, the time limit should be prior to issue of the final report. So the QC partner should have concluded his quality control review before the engagement partner issues the final report.
Hello. Hello,
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Lokesh. I have
Yes,
a
sir.
small. I am Srinivas Rao from Hyderabad.
Sir.
Suppose a firm has got two partners, which is peer reviewed, it is auditing the listed company. In the first term, one partner is engagement partner, another partner is engagement review.
Yes, sir. Quality control partner. Yes, sir.
Now the firm is being appointed for second term. Then can the previous engagement partner become engagement review control review
Good
quality
question.
control person reviewer? Then
Good question, sir.
previous partner reviewer can become engagement partner in the second term.
A very good question, sir. This kind of practical situation arises. In fact, an engagement partner becoming a QC partner subsequently, there will be a familiarity threat because the QC partner should be unrelated to an engagement who can independently and objectively assess the the professional judgments taken by the engagement partner. So there will be a familiarity threat, and that is why the standards provides a small leeway. It says the QC person can also be an external party who is not a partner of the firm. But that external party should have the authority, objectivity, and technical knowledge to deal with the subject. So it can be an external person also.
A chartered accountant, practicing individual chartered accountant can be appointed as the external.
Yes, sir. Yes, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
So it does not necessarily say a member of ICAI, sir. So it just says any, so it could be any person who's suitably qualified, which we concur should be another chartered accountant.
Okay. Thank you.
So we'll move on to the third aspect, third element of SQC1, which is client acceptance and continuance. The discussion is twofold because in this particular instance, it's important to understand the integrity of the client on one side and the competence on the firm on the other side. There could be an issue related to acceptance of an engagement because we are not happy with the integrity of the client, or there is some information that is available that makes us conclude that client lacks integrity. That is one aspect. And the other aspect is client has absolute integrity, but because of time issue or resource constraint or lack of knowledge in that particular service vertical or business vertical, we are not competent to perform the engagement. Number three is there is some ethical issues where either, say, for example, the board of director and the promoter and the probably a partner of the firm, there is some relationship which bars us to do it. So there could be client issues, there could be firm related issues, and the third one is ethical issues. So all combinations should suit. Say, for example, client integrity is satisfied, firm is also competent, which means I have the capacity, time, and resources to do the engagement, but unfortunately, the board of director and the partner are related. There could be an ethical issue. On the converse, ethically, everything should be, it could be all right. Firm is also competent, but unfortunately, the client lacks integrity. So all these combinations of three aspects have to be confirmed in two ways. One is when we're accepting a new client, or also during continuance of an existing client, because ethical issues can arise during the course of audit also. We can have resource constraints, capability, time issues during performance of engagement also, and integrity issues may arise during the course of engagement. I'll give you some examples where instances of discontinuance. In first instance, in case there is some raid that happens from regulatory authorities in the client premises, wherein there have been crucial evidences gathered, which comes to the conclusion of the auditor that clients lack integrity, you may discontinue the audit. Number two, there could be a situation where a notification comes from a government that you cannot do more than X number of audits, and because of which you lack capability, time, and resources, and therefore you have to give up certain audits. And number 3 is what I mentioned regarding ethical requirement. There could be any relationship issue between the client and the partner or the audit personnel, which requires you to be very, very methodical in client acceptance and continuance. So it is from the client side, regulatory side, and firm side. So the QC manual should elaborate and make us understand the policies and procedures for acceptance of clients. So what should I do before I accept a client, or what should I do when I give my further appointment for continuance of the client should be established in the QC manual. So these are the examples that we dealt with earlier. It's been documented here. Client integrity, we need to know the identity, reputation of the owners. What is the nature of operation? What are the attitude of owners? Do they have a proper governing body for establishing internal controls? Are they aggressive towards maintaining fee as low as possible? They are over, pressing us to, reduce our fee structure. Any indication of scope limitation? For example, before discussion of engagement, they are saying that you can go to all location except this particular location. Such any limitation that they are putting in. Indications of any money laundering that comes to us earlier, or non-content. There's frequently auditors are changing. Earlier, previous auditor has stepped down because of some issues. So these are all the aspects that we need to consider during client integrity. Firm capacity, most important being industry knowledge. We should understand that we have the exposure within that industry to perform the audit or the engagement. Experience in those regulatory requirements. Say if we are doing, say for example, a power entity, you should know the power sector regulations. If you're doing an insurance company, we should do the IRDA regulations well. If you're doing a bank audit, we should be very clear about the RBI requirements. The third is ability to gain necessary skills. So even if you have limited, at least you're able to develop the skills to do the particular engagement. You have availability of experts and individuals who fulfill the criteria of experts. And most important thing is you should be able to complete the engagement within the reporting deadline, be it stock exchanges within the number of days for quarterly reporting or annual reporting, or before the AGM commitment dates in case of other entities. Ethical issues, which I said, professional legal responsibility, we'll have to assess, and possibility of withdrawal. So is it physically possible to withdraw? Because there are, as we understand in SEBI, where between the quarters, there is a restriction in withdrawal of audit. So if you face any threats with regard to this particular client acceptance that you cannot withdraw at any point in time, that also should be considered while you're accepting or continuing the client engagement. So withdrawal from engagement, this policy document, QC manual, should address, how are the issues, whether we should need to discuss with the appropriate level of management or those charged with governance. Is it mandatory to discuss or report to them on any issues? If there are no such requirement, then whether the professional and regulatory requirement allows you to withdraw before issuance of any report, or whether the report of withdrawal should be given to any government body or to the client or to those charged with governance. And we should document the issues related to the withdrawal from engagement. Yeah. Before we move on to the fourth element, I will take in questions concerning client acceptance. Yeah, there's one question which says client acceptance. How does it work in audit allotments by CAG? Yes, the very relevant question. So CAG audit allotments happens through an empanelment procedure. So when CAG allots audit, it has happened practically also, where an audit allotted by CAG has been refused on account of certain issues related to the SUC. It could be independence issues or client acceptance issues, which we can very well write back to CAG that there is an independence conflict, and or there any other conflict for which we are not eligible and therefore do not consider us. So with no questions, we'll move on to the fourth important element, which personally I consider the most relevant and important for all, which is human resources, because without human resources, I don't think any of these criteria will be applicable. It's very, very important. So the QC manual should establish policy and procedures to ensure that sufficient personnel with capability, commitment, competence, and to abide by ethical principles are available within the firm, which includes the partners also. So these policies should stipulate and ensure that the appropriate report is issued based on the circumstances. So the QC manual should tag a HR policy, which very clearly states what is my recruitment goal, what is my performance evaluation, how to evaluate career development, promotions, compensations, personnel's, estimating the need for each engagement, and what are the competence that each person should have, should be addressed within the HR policies. And the human resource team should be clearly aware of the ICA's roles and responsibilities, and suitable recruitment should be done. And subsequent performance evaluations, career development should also be tagged to this QC policies. Let's deal with the individual aspects which have been mentioned here. Capabilities and competence. How to develop capabilities and competence within the human resource. It should be developed through professional education. The CPA seminars are one of these aspects to develop professional education, which is continuous development and training. In-house training can be given continuously. Sufficient work experience staff can also be put in place, and coaching by experienced staff. So the higher audit managers should continuously coach the, say, an article clerks or other paid assistants to develop capabilities and competence. Performance evaluation. So continuous awareness should be promoted within the firms to ensure that the ethical principles and performance are being met. So during performance evaluation, compensations, promotions, this should be a key criteria where the audit staff should have established absolute audit quality in terms of ethics and other quality control measures. And during the evaluation counseling, these questions related to QC manual should be asked and ensure that they are fully aware of. And the personnel should also help in understanding the quality to adhere to these ethics and principles, which are important for promotion. So the staff should also understand that my career goal and my development as a career path is purely bound by having quality. So quality precedes business should be clearly understood by the audit staff or the engagement staff. Responsibility for each engagement to be assigned. So the QC manual should also assess that relevant people with relevant experience are assigned duties and reporting responsibilities to each engagement partner. So there could always be a level of hierarchy also where multiple designated officers report to each other. Say an article reports to an audit manager reports to a director, and director reports to an engagement partner. Or in lean structures, each responsibility to be governed to an audit manager to report to director or an engagement partner directly. So the policies and procedures should ensure that the role of engagement partners communicated to the key personnel, that is TCWG. Engagement partner is capable and competent and has the authority, and responsibility of engagement partner is very clearly defined and communicated to them. In any engagement, appropriate staff needs to be assigned in terms of competence and capability. In assessing, they should check what kind of similar type of engagements they've done, whether they have the appropriate technical knowledge, industry knowledge. He or she will be able to apply professional judgment, and he has fully understood the QC policy. I think this in practice we are doing, but however, this must be more coming from a QC manual documented process. When, say, for example, a person who's done earlier bank audit will be put back into bank audit because he has the relevant knowledge. A company who is an engagement team member who's done an automobile company can be put into another engagement dealing with an automobile entity, so that the relevant staff is being put in those relevant audits. Yeah, so this is the fourth important element, which I think in practice most of us are doing. However, this should be driven from the QC policies. I will wait for a minute to take in questions from the participants. Yes, sir. So one of the questions is, it was issued in April 2008. I think subsequently in September 2009, the revised edition has also come. So that is the implementation guide that I'm referring to. Most welcome, sir.
Members, any questions?
Sure. We'll move on, sir, to the
Yeah,
fifth element, which is the performance of the engagement, which is again the most crucial aspect. Having leadership, having ethics, having accepted the engagement, having put in the human resource, ideally we have to perform the engagement. So that is the most crucial aspect. So in engagement performance, it should ensure, the QC manual should also ensure that all professional standards, laws and regulations are completely being established. Policies should be ensured to follow these professional standards and laws and regulations, and the engagement partner shall issue reports appropriate to a situation or circumstances. The policy should address these following facts, sir. That is, the briefing engagement team should be addressed to this policy, that while an engagement performance done, which we normally call as a planning meeting. So when before a planning memorandum is done, audit planning is also an important standard, which requires us to have a planning memorandum on who will do what, which audit team member will perform what audit procedures, and what are the timelines, which we call as the assignment planning timetable, where we reverse work based on the board meeting dates in case of listed entities. So all this has to be part of the planning meeting, which are briefed to the engagement team along with the quality control process. And this should also address process for complying with engagement standards, be it standards on auditing or related service or SRE. There's a process for supervision of staff and training and coaching given the circumstance. How to review work, judgments and forming of report, documentation, and policies to keep. So the engagement performance element specifies briefing for engagement team, how to continuously comply with the engagement standards, what is the process for supervision. Say an audit manager will be a reporting person to an article clerk, who in turn will report based on each schedules to a director, and the director brings the audit summary memorandum to the engagement partner. So this is the process of supervision. And review of work. So say for example, cash and bank process is being done by an article clerk. So when the actual verification process is being done, it should be done by an audit manager in the presence of an audit manager who is also a chartered accountant. So this level of reviewing from work should be done. And any judgment is being done, professional judgment should be ideally given to the higher up people. We should not probably let an audit assistant or an article clerk take any judgmental calls on, say, sampling procedures or materiality criteria, or judging any particular, say, a deferred tax requirement or a write-off requirement or a write-back requirement. Another important aspect is documentation of work performed. So each documentation, a schedule control sheet or a planning memorandum or an audit summary memorandum or an engagement documentation. So this documentation will be performed by whom, and what is the timing and extent of review. So I will review an audit documentation every week or every fortnightly, or based on requirement when any crucial aspect comes up, and policies to keep all these procedures current. So it should be a continuous process. Important aspects in engagement performance: supervision, which I think you're all aware how important supervision is, where continuous monitoring has to be done. A review process has to be done for each of the documentation. Say an initial materiality is set at 1% of turnover. We have where there are significant errors that are emerging. Should the materiality criteria increase or decrease based on the first materiality? So this kind of review process. Consultation. So there should be periodic consultation with the engagement team members. So is the director or the audit manager meeting with the engagement staff very frequently? Is it weekly consultation? Now, if there is a difference of opinion between an engagement team member, audit manager, then how does that get resolved? Has to be also documented and mentioned. The engagement team's QC review should also specify the nature, timing, and extent of QC review, because the quality control reviewer should have concluded his quality review before issue of the report. So you should continuously plan with the quality control reviewer. So let us meet every 15 days or every first Saturday of every month, something of that sort, depending on the engagement requirement, the nature, timing, and extent of QC review. Eligibility criteria for QC reviewer should be predetermined, whether he is another partner who is eligible to do. We already discussed this. And documentation. So the engagement quality control team or the quality control partner should document all this separately also. Engagement documentation, the assembly of final audit file. The standards provide us a 60-day time period from the engagement closure date to assembly of, not to prepare documentation, but to assemble files that have already been documented. Confidentiality and safe custody. So it should be put in an appropriate pace in safe custody. And accessibility of engagement documents. So tomorrow, if there is a peer review, that should be easily accessible and ability to pull that documentation easily. Document retention period. The current SQC standard after an initial revision has maintained that a 7-year period is the retention period for any documentation. And ownership. So who will have which audit manager or which partner is tagged to that documentation box, who is entitled to open, review, or extract elements of the documentation should also be made very clear in an SQC sheet. I'm sure most of us are aware that after conclusion of audit, either the box file goes into another box file within the godown, or put in boxes within cupboards within the audit firm. So what is important is whether it is in safe custody, whether it is accessible, who owns that particular documentation, who has access to that, should all come within the QC policies. Now there are service providers, just practically speaking, for the benefit of members, there are service providers who factually do documentation storage. So they will come to your office, barcode each file, and take it from your office and retain it. And whenever you call, they'll come and deliver it in your office based on that barcode. And they'll give you an online access of those box files. Even if you want to take one paper, scan it, they will scan it and send it to you, or it will be put on cloud. So these kind of services are also there. So if you are using those kind of services, that should also be mentioned in your QC manual. Supervision, that is to track the process of the engagement, should consider the capabilities and competence of each team member who is enabled to supervise the engagement team, and any periodic issues that are arising out of the engagement, the supervising person should be able to identify the matters and consult and consideration by the experienced team members. Review, as I said, is a matter of consultation. The matter to be considered by the reviewer is performance of work. What are the significant audit issues that are raised for further consultation? Any requirement to review or revise the nature and timing of extent perform? Like I said, materiality criteria, we should do more vouching in respect of this particular aspect, because we found that the initial materiality is very low. And work supports the conclusion. The reviewer should ensure that any conclusion that is derived is supported by audit evidence, that is sufficient and appropriate evidence to achieve the engagement objectives. Consultation, this again, as we discussed, the appropriate consultation measures have to be done in terms of contentious matters, where there are any issues are associated with the audit points. And the nature and scope of consultation is documented. So who did we consult? Did we take any legal opinion from any law firm? Did we take any re-evaluated the actual assumptions? Have we taken any fair value separately that we did for any Ind AS 109 related financial assets, any financial instruments separately? any contingent liability related legal opinions we have taken, contractual related reading, have we taken any consultation work? All this should be documented. So who should we consult? The person should have knowledge, seniority, and experience. And external consultation, we can look at appropriate legal firms or suitable organizations. Documentation, the criteria is sufficiently complete and detailed documentation, and the result of consultations based on decisions and how it was implemented. Any difference of opinion also should be documented and how it was resolved. Any difference of if an engagement team feels that this particular standard compliance was not up to the mark, or this particular professional judgment is different, then how that was resolved with consultant's view or engagement partner's view or the quality control reviewer's view should be documented. And the report shall not be issued until the entire matter gets completely resolved. The engagement QC review, which is the important aspect within the monitoring matters in the engagement performance, is the requirement to QC review for all audits of listed entities. Like I said, this standard mandates QC review for all listed entities, and the firm can establish criteria for other audits. Like it becomes even more important now because, as we understand, the NFRA 2 form requires us to mandate who is the quality control reviewer for each of these items. So it need not necessarily be listed entities based on net worth, other criteria. There could also be entities falling within the NFRA framework, which mandates the engagement partner's requirement. So this particular QC document shall detail the policies and procedures for all this, including replacement in case the quality control reviewer becomes, is unable to perform because of various other matters. Then what is the code for replacement also should be documented. Nature, timing, and extent, we have discussed this. So the review should involve the engagement partner with the financial statements and the review, the report. Selected working papers which involve significant judgment and conclusion of team should be reviewed by the QC reviewer. And the extent of work depends on the complexity. So there are less complex matters. The QC reviewer will oversee the major requirements. There are some contentious issues and any complexity involved, and the QC reviewer can go a little deeper into it. And the review does not reduce the responsibility of the engagement partner. So just by doing a quality control review, as per this law legal requirement, the engagement partner cannot say that this was subject to QC review who has passed it, and therefore I am not responsible, because eventually the final person who is signing the audit report in case of audit engagement is the engagement partner. So these are the conditions given in considerations given in terms of review for a listed entity. So the firm's independence, which we have already discussed, risk, that is in case of engagements performance or during acceptance, which we have discussed, judgments regarding materiality and risk, this also we have discussed, consultation to take place on significant contentious matters, we just discussed that, significance and disposition of corrected and uncorrected misstatements. Yes. So I think we all agree that in an audit, there can always be misstatements. So misstatements that are corrected are resolved matters, misstatements that are uncorrected. So the standards, other standards state that any uncorrected misstatement should not be so material that it will lead to a misstatement in financial statement. So if there are 20 uncorrected misstatements that the engagement partner has said it's okay, the quality control reviewer should evaluate whether those inability to uncorrect that misstatement or rectify that misstatement is on account of these facts, and those are permitted and within the materiality limits. It's a practical example. Matters to be communicated, key audit matters, when engagement partner says, okay, these are 10 audit matters which I feel are important to be communicated, and thereafter go into the audit report based on SAS 701 criteria, the review partner shall assess whether it is the right audit matters that are going, or there are other matters that can be included or language can be changed. what are the working papers that are selected for review, whether it actually reflects significant judgments and conclusion reached has to be critically assessed by the quality control reviewer, and the final appropriateness of report issue as an unmodified opinion given, whether it satisfies the criteria or is there any requirement for modification has to be assessed. Eligibility criteria for QC reviewer, we had also touched upon this fact. The QC reviewer, if he is just another partner of the firm, it takes care of most of these aspects because he'll be a member of ICAI. So we can conclude that he has a technical qualification. And if he's any other external person, it's important that they meet all these criteria. So the objectivity, how shall a QC reviewer maintain his objectivity? He cannot be selected by the engagement partner because there should not be a tie-up between the engagement partner and the QC reviewer. He should be selected on, say, on a lot basis or completely unassociated. He should not have participated in the engagement. That is, he should not be part of the engagement team. And he does not make decisions for the engagement. He cannot be in a review role also, and not subject to threats. So he should not have any independent threats related to performing QC review. Documenting QC review, somebody had asked me a question earlier that whether the quality control reviewer should also give a separate report. It does not say anything in specified format, but documentation of QC review is important. So the policies and procedure require that the procedures done by QC review has been performed and it has been completed before the report is issued, and reviewer is not aware that there are any unresolved matters. So to conclude that these are done, all documentation necessary has to be done. So what kind of files you had selected, what kind of issues you have discussed with the engagement team and the engagement partner, all this can be minuted to satisfy performance of engagement quality control review. Assembly of files, like I said, 60 days time period is given to assemble the audit files. And this term is very, very important because it says assembly of files that has been documented. It does not mean documentation preparation. So all documentation should have been prepared prior to issuance of report, but to assemble this file into a proper manner, 60 days time period is given. These are other relevant requirements in terms of confidentiality, custody, maintenance, what are the legal regulatory requirements, and who are having adequate controls to perform and protect the integrity in all stages of engagement is mentioned in the standard also. Some controls, like for example, if all the documentation is maintained in cloud or a common server, or even locked up in a particular cupboard in office, who has access to it? Who can do the backup routines if in case of an electronic documentation? Who has the authority and make procedures for distributing documentation before the start and the end for collating? Who has restricted access? For example, some cases we don't give access of certain crucial documentation for audit assistance. So who has confidentiality of hard copy? Client sometimes says board minutes, we cannot share it through email. You can come read and also document it. So those board minutes, who has access to? So these kind of documents should also be protected. Retention of audit documentation is currently a 7-year period, which has been done based on the council's decision taken in 2009 August. Originally, it was 10 years. Yeah. Before we move on to the last element, 6th element, monitoring, I will take questions. Some of the questions are already come here. I'll read it one by one. Sir, the familiarity question does not arise where proprietor continues the engagement for audit, where audit company does not follow. Yeah, so here typically in proprietorship entities, the familiarity threat with the management may arise in case of independence conflict. However, the familiarity between an engagement team member and a review partner may not arise because it's a sole proprietorship. So when law permits you to do audit without rotation, the QC manual should very clearly say that on continuance of an engagement, the item number 3, element number 3, you should ensure that at any given point in time, this particular familiarity threat is not endangered. So even if we are doing without rotation, this should continue. As far as we continue that client continuance requirement and ethical requirement, this should be all right, sir. Next question is risk of proceeding from disciplinary data due to any matters, including uncorrected matters. What is the relevant risk between engagement C and review C? Yes. So we don't know how the benches of disciplinary directorates are dealing in case of in specific cases where an engagement partner has not performed his duty or have not done this particularly. I think it acts on a case-to-case basis only, sir. So if you ask me today whether a disciplinary directorate or NFRA, how they take action against either the engagement partner or a QC partner, I think it's on a case-to-case basis. There are some evidences available from NFRA's audit quality review reports issued, which are in the public domain, where the quality control partners' documents have also been assessed. But what is the level of risk? I don't think I'm appropriate to answer that. But I think it's important that each of the partners, be it a quality control partner and engagement partner, satisfy themselves appropriately through documentation. Yeah, I'll wait for a couple of minutes. Any further questions? Members may unmute and also speak.
So if you want, you can take break also, sir, for 5 minutes because it is continuous sessions for 3 hours.
No problem. So we'll just conclude this monitoring because after this is just documentation. I'll just quickly run through this.
Yeah. So whenever you want, you can just, we'll have a short break for 5 to 7 minutes.
I just don't want to break this. That is the sixth element.
Yeah.
So we'll quickly complete the sixth element, which is the monitoring of the engagement. So the QC manual should ensure that the monitoring is a continuous process. It is relevant, adequate, operating effectively, and complied within the practice. So the monitoring process should be throughout the engagement. It should be relevant. It's an ongoing consideration for periodic inspection of completed assignments also. The benefits of having a monitoring is to ensure that the quality control process is designed and effectively implemented. There could be changes also. Say the QC reviewer is different. You may have to amend the QC manual or the documentation policies. Instead of physical documentation, you have moved to a cloud documentation. Or each documentation is maintained within, say, a laptop or a OneDrive of each of those engagement team members. All this have to be captured in the QC manual, sir. So these are the benefits of evaluation where it is required, where it's appropriately designed, effectively implemented, which has resulted in the proper reporting in circumstances and an ongoing analysis of the QC system also. Any new development has come in, right? Right now, for example, multidisciplinary firms are allowed. So then the QC manual should appropriately get amended to ensure that, say, a lawyer has been made a partner in a multidisciplinary firm, where we're using his legal support for consultation or an expert opinion. Then suitably amendment has to be made in the QC manual. Or any independence requirement conflict has come which you need to change. Or any restriction of number of audits has come. For example, latest NBFC, we all know there is a restriction 8 per firm or network firm. Then those compliance requirements are also to be factored in this particular QC manual for continuous monitoring. That's why a monitoring of an audit work and monitoring of quality control process should be continuous. Some factors like which also include decisions on client acceptance and continuance, determination of corrected action. If there's a QC system where you need to take a corrective action, that has to be documented. Any weaknesses in any personnel and follow-up also have to be sufficiently covered in the QC manual. Selection of completed engagement, you should make a cyclical process and ensure that cycle does not exceed 3 years. One engagement for each partner in a cycle can be concluded. The factors to consider are obviously the size of the firm, number of offices, result of previous inspections, the authority of personnel and offices, nature and risk and complexity. And this most important is it can be without prior notice. And inspectors not to act as QC reviewers or part of the engagement team. Independent external inspection, not a substitute for internal monitoring program. So if you have an external inspector who is also reviewing the monitoring process of QC manuals, he need not be a substitute for the internal monitoring program. That can also continue. How to evaluate the effect of deficiencies? If there are any deficiencies noticed, is this only one-off? Because say, for example, there is an independence threat. One of the article assistants have bought a share in the company, which was brought to the notice immediately. So is this an evaluation